Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to my second floor lair. Thanks for watching, I really appreciate it. Today's topic is Resalest Remarkable Books number 11. Okay, the first book today is The Thin Red Line by James Jones, published in 1962. Now this is a World War II novel set in Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands in the Pacific Ocean. And there was some very, very tough fighting there between Americans and the Japanese, and I believe also Australians were involved. Very tough fighting, and this book really gets into how the stress the men were under, and the title, The Thin Red Line, refers to the becoming insane. That there's a line that the men are under so much strain, and they're involved in murder and death and destruction, and so some of the fellows, if they go too far, they lose their minds, they become insane, they develop mental illness, and they really have to be pushed by their officers and so forth to continue fighting, to be ready to fight, and almost to, as I said, to the brink of insanity. And that's really what this book refers to. And some men, it's too much for them. Many men develop mental illness from war, and it's very easy to understand why, because it's such a very, very tough thing, a horrible thing to be involved in. So this is the second in the trilogy that he wrote about the Second World War, James Jones. I never read the first one, which was From Here to Eternity. The next book is The Palace by Paul Erdman, published in 1987. Now this is a financial thriller, and it deals with money and banking and the Swiss banks and so forth, and lots of exotic locations, London, Paris, Hong Kong, New York, and the jet-set lifestyle. And it's referring to potential financial catastrophe. And so Paul Erdman had a banking background, and then he wrote these very interesting novels. They're financial thrillers, something different. And so he really did a good job. The next book is Touching the Heart, Volume 2 by Peter Michael, published in 1995. These are more very wonderful stories of Father Peter Michael, who was a German priest in the Philippines for many years, and his experiences as a hospital chaplain, comforting, counseling people as they're very ill, perhaps dying. And they're wonderful hospital stories of faith, suffering, and salvation. And all the work he did, all the people that he met and tried to help during their time of need. God bless Peter Michael. He was one of my very good friends at Christ the King Seminary in Quezon City, Philippines. The next book is The Inn of the Sixth Happiness by Alan Burgess, published in 1957. Now this is a wonderful story. It's true. It's nonfiction, and has wonderful geography. Set in Siberia and China. Now it's the story of a woman who was an English missionary in China before and during the Second World War, and of course that was pretty tough situation to be in, with the Japanese occupation of China, and then you had the Civil War between the communists and the nationalists, between Mao Zedong's forces and Chiang Kai-shek. And so this woman, she became fluent in Chinese language, and she was a real leader in helping children. I guess she must have been a teacher, and she fought the Japanese. And I think she had to get out of China actually after the war when the communists took over, and that involved this Siberian adventure. So it's a true story, very, very wonderful, very inspiring. What one person can do who's a good person and determined to do good and serve God. God bless her. Okay, the next book is The Outskirts of Hell by Charles R. Goodman, published in 1986. Now this is pulp fiction. I would describe it as puerile. I wrote in my book diary that a 15-year-old could have written this, yet it's really a good story. And the character has an incredible odyssey. He's an African-American slave who becomes a Buffalo Soldier to Now that reminds me of the song by Bob Marley, the reggae song. Now, who were Buffalo Soldiers? They were African American soldiers fighting American Indians in the West in the 19th century. So this fellow, he's a slave, becomes free, becomes a Buffalo Soldier, and then later he's a gold miner, and he becomes a slave again, which happened very often. This movie 12 Years a Slave, very often just because of their skin, they could become enslaved because someone was greedy and wanted to make money from their sale. Eventually, he ended up in China, and he got revenge against those who had sold him into slavery again. So this is some story. Really something. Charles R. Goodman. Okay. The next book is The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury, published in 1950. Ray Bradbury is a wonderful science fiction author, and this is one of his very well-known novels. And it's science fiction. It's about the idea of African Americans getting fed up with how they'd been treated in the United States with racism and discrimination, and the decision that they made to leave the Earth. And so this is about the colonization of Mars by African Americans. Really something. And this is also Ray Bradbury. You'd have to give credit in the civil rights movement for fighting for equal rights and better treatment for African Americans, equal rights before the law. So this is a very nice book. I highly recommend it. The next book is The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom, published in 1971. This is an incredible book. One of the best books I've ever read. It was given to me by a friend, father of a friend of mine, and it's a true story of this woman, the author, Corrie ten Boom. She was from Holland, and during the Second World War, she and her sister were middle-aged, and they didn't have children. They weren't married. And then, they became aware that during the German occupation of Holland and of all of Europe, most of Europe, that Jews were being arrested and mistreated, very badly mistreated, and murdered. So they decided to hide Jews in their home, kind of like the Anne Frank family. And the thing is, they got caught. And so she ended up going to she and her father and her sister went to a concentration camp, a death camp. And her older sister was very spiritual person. She kept, even though this was a horrendous situation, they'd lost their freedom and their property and so forth, and they were in a death camp. And the sister kept telling Corrie, don't hate, no hate, no hate, and to forgive, and to thank God for everything. She's an extremely spiritual person. And Corrie said, well, I'm not going to thank God for the fleas that they had in this dormitory. And then the thing is, because there were fleas, these Nazi prison guards didn't want to come in. So they were able to hold church services, which actually had been forbidden. So you could see that, good had come out of that. And eventually her father died, and this very spiritual sister died, but Corrie survived. And she became a very strong Christian, traveled all over the world and told about her life and her experiences. And one of the quotes was, Jesus can turn loss into glory. And she keeps saying over and over, we should thank God for the good and bad things in life, that God has a purpose for everything. Bad things, we don't like bad things, but they do serve a purpose. They can help us to change our character for the better. So I highly recommend this book. She gave a speech once, and afterward, a member of the audience came up to her, and it turned out to be a prison guard that she knew that had been very cruel, and she came and she was filled with hatred. She saw this man, and he came up to her with a big smile, and he said, "Oh, isn't it wonderful how God washes away all of our sins?" And she was actually at that moment full of hate, but. I guess she fought it, and she thought, I have to forgive. We have to forgive. If we don't forgive, it's self-destruction. So she did. She forgave this man. I don't think he didn't recognize her, but she did as well. It kind of reminded me of the scene of Joseph and her brothers, and when someone has really hurt you, and how it might be hard to do, but we really need to forgive. Wonderful book, an amazing woman, Corrie ten Boom. The next book is The Pocket Book of O. Henry Stories by O. Henry. Now the O is we don't know what his full name is, what the O stands for. Harry Hansen is the editor. These are short stories by this O, and it would be good to know what the O stands for, but I don't know. These stories were written between 1900 and 1910, and they're short stories. They're humorous, ironic, and The Mood of America, 1905, a period piece. So to see what our country was like as lots of changes were coming. This was, the beginning of the airplane era, very early, and the automobile era, and of course the railroads were king at that time, and city life was definitely in full swing. The United States had become a very urban country, factory life and so forth, so O. Henry is highly regarded. He's a wonderful short story author. The next book is The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman by Ernest Gaines, published in 1971. Now, they had a wonderful TV miniseries based on this book, and Cicely Tyson, I believe, was the actress. And the thing is, just a true story. This woman had been born a slave, but yet she lived to see the civil rights movement. And at the very end, there's a very touching scene where she drinks out of the white-only drinking fountain. And, so she saw an incredible history of our country. She must have been a child during the slavery days, because it would have been 100 years, and she must have lived to be over 100. So it was, kind of like Roots. This was a history of African Americans going back to slavery days, and then the Civil War, and then after, what they went through in the latter 1800s into the 20th century. It's a wonderful book. The next book is Platoon by Dale A. Dye, published in 1986. It's based on Oliver Stone's screenplay. Now, Platoon was a very famous movie back in I believe in 86 about the Vietnam War. Charlie Sheen was in that, and some of these other fellows, and it was a very, very powerful movie. And they had these characters, Elias, who was the very good guy who dies at the end, and Barnes, who I think was the kind of a mean guy. And at one point, this Barnes comes in. A lot of the guys were smoking marijuana, and he says, "So, one of you guys, are you trying to escape from reality?" He goes, "I am reality," something like that. So and there was this African American guy who says, "Yeah, after we get home, it's going to be nothing but gravy." And of course, they didn't know that actually coming home to the, life always has problems. And so I think this is one of maybe the best Vietnam War movies. And this is the book that's connected to the movie. The next book is Casino Royale by Ian Fleming, published in 1953. This is the first James Bond novel. The thing is, James Bond, the character was a character created by this author, Ian Fleming, and they have this acronym for this evil organization, SMERSH. Of course, he created James Bond. There's been maybe 30 movies so far, and this is how it all started. Ian Fleming, who actually had experience in the Second World War as a secret agent with espionage, and so he created this character based on his experiences. So this is the beginning, Casino Royale, which came out in 1953, and then, of course, the movies started coming out in the 60s. The next book is The Eternal Savage by Edgar Rice Burroughs, published in 1914. It's also known as The Eternal Lover and Sweetheart Primeval. Now, this is more pulp fiction. Another fairly short book, about 200 pages. The writing is incredibly bad. He uses expressions like hither and thither, but it definitely has its endearing parts. The prehistoric descriptions are compelling, and there's a 100,000-year-old love affair to capture the imagination. Just imagine. I wonder how that happened, because I haven't read. It's been a long time since I read it. But Edgar Rice Burroughs, the famous creator of Tarzan. The next book is The Selling of the President, 1968, by Joe McGinniss, published in 1969. Now, this is about the U.S. presidential campaign in 1968, specifically that of Richard Nixon. And Richard Nixon's campaign used television advertising for the first time in an election, or more than anyone else. And of course, in subsequent elections, it's become extremely important. Crafting very compelling and television commercials that are convincing, that get the voters to vote for the candidates. So every time it's election time, you see all these TV commercials, and this is how it really started, 1968, with Richard Nixon's campaign, because because they work, and the candidates want to win, and you have to use psychology, and you have to do a good job, and they put a lot of thought and money into these commercials. Okay, the next book is The Deep by Peter Benchley, published in 1976. And this is, he's the creator of Jaws, of course, the famous shark book and movie. The movie was made from. In this novel, you have, it's set near Bermuda in the Atlantic Ocean, and you have scuba divers and sharks and drugs and gold. So it's, it's an adventure in the underwater, because, this is kind of prophetic, because by the 1980s, there were a lot of drug smuggling going on between Colombia and the United States, and they'd drop off the drugs, the cocaine in the Bahamas, and then it would be brought into the U.S. and into Florida. So Peter Benchley, The Deep. The next book is Master of the World by Jules Verne, published in 1904. This is a wonderful Jules Verne novel, and Rocky River, where I'm from the Rocky River, Ohio, which is named after the Rocky River, which is one of the rivers that flows into Lake Erie in the Great Lakes. And actually, in this book, most of the action in the book takes place on Lake Erie. And again, Verne was the science fiction pioneer, or the creator of science fiction. And in this novel, he has a machine, which is a car, a boat, a submarine, and an airplane all at the same time. It can change from one to the other. For example, if you're driving and you come, let's say you're using it as a car, and then you come to a body of water, then it can be converted into a boat. And then when you're riding in the boat, it can turn into a submarine and submerge. And then if you're using it as a car or a boat, it can be turned into an airplane. And the best part, the very exciting part in this book, is when the guy the character is using the machine as a boat, and he's heading toward the Niagara Falls. And then at the last minute, he turns it into an airplane. Instead of plunging over the falls, he turns it into an airplane and flies away. So Jules Verne, what an incredible author, and this is one of his best books. The next book is All Pro Baseball Stars, 83, as in 1983, by Bruce Weber, published in 1983. So this would have some of the famous players from 1982, the memorable ones that, in my case, from the Milwaukee Brewers, who made it to the World Series and pushed the St. Louis Cardinals to 7 games, but came up short. Really a tremendous hitting team, guys like Gorman Thomas and Robin Yount, Jim Gantner, Sal Bando, and the pitchers, Raleigh Fingers, Don Sutton, and so forth. So this, and the other players, stars of that era, and this would be in the early 1980s. The next book is Rilla of Ingleside by Lucy Maud Montgomery, published in 1921. And this is the 8th and the last of the Anne of Green Gables novels. So I finally made it through all 8. The story is set during World War I, and one of Anne's sons was named Walter, and in the story he's killed in action in France in the First World War. So that was so this depicts Anne grieving. She's a long way from this young girl who had been adopted by Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert, and now she's an older woman, and her son was killed in the war. So that was really, really tough on her. Of course, it's a fictional character, but Anne of Green Gables really became so real for many, many people. And then the thought that her son died in the First World War is very, very heartbreaking. But of course, it happened to many millions of mothers lost their sons in the First World War. And of course, That was the first really horrendous war with had so many deaths. The next three books are Octopussy, The Living Daylights, and The Property of a Lady by Ian Fleming, published in 1965, 1962, and 1963. Now, these were in one volume. They're short novels. James Bond is the character, and two of the novels have been made into movies, Octopussy and The Living Daylights. Some of the themes are World War II treachery, an assassination in Berlin, Germany, and a London auction. So, yeah, Ian Fleming, what a wonderful thing he did, creating this character who's so dashing and interesting and exciting. And they have, of course, the movies where they go to Hong Kong and London and the Caribbean, all over the world, in different parts of Europe and Asia and so forth. The next book is Peace Breaks Out by John Knowles, published in 1981. Of course, he's the author of A Separate Peace, and this is a return to that school, the Devon Prep School. It deals with teenagers. This is like a high school during the Second World War era. And some of the similar themes come out. The betrayal, which was the very sad theme from the first novel. And then supposedly the genesis of human monsters, when they're young, what they're like. How I mentioned in my diary Hitler and Stalin, but other people who become very powerful and destructive. The next book is Roommates by Max Apple, published in 1994. This is a true story. It's very touching. It's about family life. And there's a cantankerous 105-year-old Lithuanian great-grandfather named Rocky. Very old fella and kind of a little bit difficult. But when the author's wife develops multiple sclerosis, Rocky is very, very helpful. He he pitches in, and really helps the author, Max Apple. So this is a very touching book. It's a very simple and effective style. I recommend it. Nice story. The next book is Icequake by Crawford Kilian, published in 1979. This is a great novel set in Antarctica, and which one of the places I've found very interesting. If you look at a world map, you don't get to see very much of Antarctica. It's not well depicted because it's just at the bottom. You see a little bit at the bottom. So you really need a map of Antarctica itself, and it's a very large, mostly round. It's a continent, and and so when I read this book, I by this time I had purchased or acquired an Antarctica wall map that I had framed, and so. And as I read this novel, I followed the action of these different locations, like the Ross Ice Shelf and Shackleton Station, and Vostok, which was the Russian place. So, and of course, you have the Antarctic Peninsula. So, Icequake is I guess must have been an earthquake in Antarctica. Antarctica has 90% of the world's ice. Yeah, and then a telephone's ringing, which kind of interrupting us. 90% of the world's ice. So, we'll wait for this thing to finish. Oh, it stopped. Okay. So, 90% of the world's ice. So, isn't that interesting? And now with global warming, it's real dangerous that if that ice melts and the sea levels would rise. Okay. The next book is The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells, published in 1896, and this is a novel by the War of the Worlds fellow, and it's a story of a mad doctor trying to make human beings from animal parts, from animals, and it's a horror novel. It's things don't work out. I don't know why he wanted to do this, but this is just this story that H.G. Wells told. The Island of Dr. Moreau. It's a horror novel set on an island with a mad doctor. The next book is The Eagle and the Raven by James A. Michener, published in 1990. Now, this is the story of the United States and Texas, of Sam Houston and of Texas and Santa Ana of Mexico. You know, way back in the 19th century, Texas originally had been a part of Mexico. And then there was a large American population that moved there. And then they decided to fight for independence. They became an independent country, Texas. Then eventually Texas joined the United States. But anyway, during the struggle for Texan independence, you could say, you had these two great leaders. Santa Anna was the dictator of Mexico, and Sam Houston, who was the president of Texas. And so this is a short Michener historical novel, and it tells that story of these two fellows and that saga of Texas drive for independence against Mexico. Okay, the next book is Chicago Lope by Paul Theroux, published in 1990. This is a rather disturbing novel. It's short. It's about a psychotic man in Chicago. He wasn't doing well. He became very disturbed, and he really had terrible relations with other people. And I guess he'd been mistreated, and then he really degenerated. So it's a story of a mentally ill person. It's very sad, So we should always try to do what we can to try to help people like this, and so that they can make their way back to health and happiness and productivity. The next book is Fighting Back by Rocky Bleier with Terry O'Neill, published in 1975. This is an amazing story. It's a true story. Rocky Bleier was an NFL player who was drafted and went to Vietnam, and he was very badly wounded. And they didn't even know if he could walk again. But it just shows what determination can do, because Rocky Bleier not only was able to walk again, but he played professional football again, and he went back to the Pittsburgh Steelers as a running back, and was a star when they won Super Bowls. And I remember very well going to games here in Cleveland Municipal Stadium. Bleier would get the ball, and man, he'd go up there and take off for maybe a 20-yard gain. And Rocky Bleier. So it really shows that no matter what happens, if you keep fighting, he had this fighting spirit. That's why it's called Fighting Back. He didn't give up. He didn't say, "Oh, I'm wounded" or whatever. And just imagine, he became, after what he'd been through in Vietnam, this terrible the wounds he had received, that he was able to be an effective running back in the NFL. Incredible story, very inspiring. Rocky Bleier. The next book is Bluebeard's Eggs and Other Stories by Margaret Atwood, published in 1983. Now, Margaret Atwood is a Canadian author. These are short stories. She kind of reminds me of John Updike, and she talks about modern life, or at least modern life at that time. This would be the 80s, and parents and so forth. So she's, I believe, still very prolific. She's still writing, still popular. I don't know if I've read anything more by her, but I probably should. Margaret Atwood, very highly respected and popular, does a good job. The books aren't too tough to read, and she does very well written. The next book is Prince Charming by the John F. Kennedy Jr. story by Wendy Lee, published in 1994. Of course, John F. Kennedy Jr. was the son of John F. Kennedy, and he had this famous father who was so handsome, elected the first Roman Catholic president in 1960, Irish American, and then was shot and killed, was assassinated when John Jr. was only 3 years old. Actually, we're the same age, and so this was tough. And it's the story of his life, growing up without a father, having this very famous historical father, and then losing him at a very young age. And of course, they had a lot of money. His mother was Jackie, married Aristotle Onassis. She became Jackie Onassis. So they had a lot of money, but he was a good guy. He wasn't spoiled by money, or you could tell he was a very good man. He didn't go into politics himself, and tragically, he died in an airplane crash. People were hoping maybe he'd go into politics and run, and I don't know if he ever would have, but obviously he couldn't after he died. So this was written before he just died a few years after this book came out. It's very sad, his death, and he was a good man, and of course, he had this legacy, this very famous father, and so John F. Kennedy Jr. God bless him. The next book is The People That Time Forgot by Edgar Rice Burroughs, published in 1918. Yeah, you could see I was reading a lot of Edgar Rice Burroughs novels, and this character is named Tom Billings, and he's in the Antarctic land of Caspak. So there's plenty of adventures. Now, back then, they didn't know much about Antarctica, and he's speculating here that there were people. There really are no natives of Antarctica except the ones that have, the people who have been coming more recently. But there was no one living there down there, a couple hundred years. So there's no civilization that developed there. It's just way too cold. Anyway, but he's speculating about this possibility of there being people there, and in this novel they're depicted as savage people and animals, and the character falls in love with Ajor, whom he describes as, quote, his pretty little barbarian. We're out of time. Thanks so much for watching. As they say in the Philippine Islands, maraming salamat. Live long and prosper. God bless you. I'll see you next time.